I'm now going back into the engine right before we are changing the active team, before we are switching turns. I might say it's just switch turns here, but you know what? I'm going to leave it as this because later on we'll introduce computer players in here. There will also be a little bit of switching going on. So yeah, I'm just going to leave it at this. Anyway, here we are now introducing a check for game over. So check if game over. And now, how do we do that? Well, we have to have a game over property, and let's see whether we got that already. So game class, we have our self.over property, and to that I'm going to add another property, which I'll just call result, and that's really just storing whether player 1 has won the game, player 2, or whether the game is not over yet, in which, in that case, it's just none. So yeah, at first it's initialized to none, but later on we'll change this to player 1 or player 2 as soon as the game is over. So let's check if the game is over. So we'll have a little variable, which I'll call game over, which we'll first set to true. And now we are going to loop through all of our opponent's indexes. And once we find one index which we have not explored yet, then we'll set game over to false. In the end, all of the opponent's indexes so opponent's indexes means all of their ships indexes, okay? So once we've clicked on all of their ships, they are no longer unknown, and then we will have won the game. And if that is the case, well, and yeah, if one of them is unknown, then the game is not yet over, but well, we initialize this to true, and if it's never set false, it will be true. So in that case, we'll then say self.over is game over. So here we'll now say if game over, self.over is, okay, no, we don't need this. We can just easily set, yeah, was my idea. Okay, self.over is equal to game.over. And yeah, then we'll set the result of the game is equal to 1 if self.player1 turn, and else we'll just set it to 2. So this should now be working. And yeah, now I will head back over to the GUI. And in the GUI, we'll now add a little game over message. We'll go down here after we've drawn the ships and everything. And here we will add the game over message. And this will only occur if the game is actually over, so only if game.over. And then we'll have a little text, which can be something like player. Then we'll have a space, and now we'll add the result of the game. So game.result plus, and then we'll say wins. Now we'll turn that into a text box. And here we'll say, we first have to have a font. And in Pygame, we have to take care of that right up here. So after we have set the display, well, before that, we'll have to initialize fonts in Python, and that is in Pygame, and that's kind of like the regular init command, but with a font in between. So we are initializing the font. Now we'll say pygame.font, and now we'll select a font, and one of the fonts that I like to use is Free Sans TTF here, and then we'll have to specify a size. I'm going to just make this 100, and I'm going to call it my font. You can really call this anything you like. Now we can go back down here to our game over message and make use of this new font. So we'll say font.render. Now what is it that we are going to be typing in that font? Well, the text that we have declared up here. And then we'll have another Boolean, which is set to false. And then we'll specify 2 colors, which is the background color and the color of the text. And then we'll blit this to the screen.blit, the text box, and then, well, the width, we'll divide this by 2 because we want this to be roughly in the center. And I just played around with a bunch of values, and I found that subtracting 240 from the X location and then setting the Y location to height over 2 minus 50. And I found that setting width over 2 minus 240 and height over 2 minus 50 kind of made for a nice text box somewhere in the center of the screen. So let's see whether that works. Okay, first thing that we have to do is we have to sync all ships. So I'm just going to do that for player 1. Up, that was a miss. First ship is down. Now we'll go on with... Oh, you notice this? It's switched turns even though player 1 just scored a hit, and we are actually still printing out these indexes. So there's still a bit more that we need to take care of. Let's head back over to the engine. Just search for print here. Oh, it's actually in the GUI, yeah. So it says here, print, don't need this, don't need that. And in our engine class, where does it say switch turns? So that is down here. Now a simple way to fix this might be to have a Boolean variable, which I'll call hit. We'll set that to false. And here, after we have scored a hit, we'll say hit is equal to true. And then down here, where we are changing the active team, so if hit, well, if not a hit, in that case, we are switching turns. So let's see if that does the trick. So I'm first going to have a miss, and I'm going to click here. And let's see if player 2 is able to make a move. And player 2 is not able to make a move. Let's see if we can go again. And we go. So we've now sunk that ship, and now it should be fairly easy to sink all of the opponent's ships. Just like that, you know, when you can actually see the board, it's super simple. And now there it is. Player 1 has won the game. So let's try this once more, and let's see if player 2 can do the same. First ship, second ship. This is the third, fourth ship, and now the last one. Player 2 has won the game, so that is working as well. Nice. So can player 1 actually make additional moves? No, nothing's happening here when I'm clicking here. Player 2 was allowed to make one additional move, but I guess at this stage it doesn't really matter. And just to even rule out that, we might say that user clicks on mouse. We could also specify if not game.over and player 1 turn. And then down here, if not game over and not player 1 turn. Let's just try and see whether that works. Sync all of these ships of player 2. It's these two, those, and then down here. Player 1 wins, player 2 can't move, and player 1 can't move either. So that is working quite nicely. So before we'll start with the computer turns, let's just add the ability to restart the game. And we can do that right up here where it says user presses key on keyboard. We have the escape key to close the animation, the spacebar to pause it. So let's introduce the return key to restart it. Not space, return key to restart the game. So if event.key is equal to pygame.K _ return, then we'll say game is equal to game. So I'm now going to start a game and hit enter, and you can see the boats are now in different locations. I'm going to, oh yeah, scored a hit. So this is nice that this is working now as well. So yeah, player 2 gets to go again. And now I'm going to hit return, and you can see the game starts over with ships in different locations. So it's finally time to implement computer turns. Before we'll start with any, AI or any coding, we'll just go into our game class and introduce a new property up here, which I'll call self.computerTurn. Okay, and we'll set this to true if, and then we'll have to have an if and else statement. So we want to be able to have both computer turns and human turns, and to, control that, to steer that, we'll have another 2 variables up here, which I'll call human1. I'll set this to true for the moment, and human2 is equal to true. Now in our engine class, we'll say that we have these 2 control variables up here, human1 and human2. And if they're, okay, they will always be specified. And then we'll have our computer turn. You know what, let's first make these properties. Human1 is equal to human1, and self.human2 is equal to human2. Now we'll say computer turn is equal to true if not self.human1, else it's false. Now, what does that do? So let's say we have these two variables both set to true. That is, we want a human to play another human. In that case, computer turn must be false. So computer turn is true if not self.human1, but human1 is true, so the computer turn will now be false. Say we had a human playing a computer turn would also be false because the human gets to go first. Now, only if human1 is false, but human2 is true, will the computer, well, and also if both are set to false and, the computer is playing against itself. So this is what this line of code does down here. And now in our makeMove class, or function actually, it's not a class, we now must not only change the active team, but we must also switch back and forth between human turns and computer turns. So here we'll now say switch between human and computer turns. Now, how do we do that? Well, when are we having a switch between computer turns? So here we'll say if self.human and not self.human2. So yeah, if we have one human player and not the other one, or not self.human1 and not self.human2. Okay, so that's the other case. This is no human is involved at all, and here only one human is involved. So if the computer is playing against itself, it's always the computer's turn. It's just a different team, but it's always the computer's job to make a move. So only then are we not switching this computer turn thing on and or off. Whereas if there's one or two humans involved, we have to, fiddle around with that. So here we'll now say self.computer_turn is equal to not self.computer_turn. So that should do the trick, I believe. I'm going to think about this part, not self-human and not. I'll have to check this in a second, okay? Yes, of course, not both of these. This is false. So this not must go. So yeah, we are really only switching between human turns and computer turns. Oh my gosh, now I see my mistake. We are only really switching between these two if one of the players is a human player and the other one is a computer. Can also be the other way around, but it has to be different. And here we have human and not human, and here we have not human and human, okay? And that means that in that instance, computer is turned on and off, okay? So this is what's happening here. And now let's create our first little AI, okay? So we'll just call this random AI. We just want the computer to make random moves right now. They don't have to be good moves, okay? And to make these moves, we'll first get the search effort off the computer. So all of the indexes that the computer has in their search grid. So I'm going to call this simply search. And this is self.player1.search if self.player1 turn. So, if the computer's making a move and this random AI function will be called, and if it's also player one's turn, then we have to access self.player1.search. Otherwise, we have to access self.player2.search. And then we'll look at all the unknown indexes. So here, this is I for I, and I'm going to make this an enum. So I'm going to enumerate search here. And then if the square is equal to u, then we want to return the index, okay? So unknown will be all of the indexes that are still unknown that we can make a guess from if we are playing purely random, okay? So we'll just randomly pick one of these. This is the ones that we're picking from to make a random move. And if the length of unknown is greater than 0, only then are we going to pick. Then we'll just select a random index. So we'll call this random index, and we'll do that using the random.choice function. Unknown. I'm going to go back up here. We already have the random module in there. Yeah, remember random rows and columns. So this is already there. We can now call the choice function from the random library, and then we will select from unknown, and then we'll make a move. So self.makeMove random index. Okay, so let's head back over to the GUI and actually make use of these two new variables here. So I'm now going to go into the game part, and I'm going to insert human1 and human2. Human2, and I'm going to copy this because we'll also have to add this to the restart of the game, which is down here. And now we have to add the computer moves. I'm going to do that, well, before the game over message. So computer moves, because right now it's still only the humans playing against each other. And even if we set one of the values to false, the computer still wouldn't do anything because somewhere we have to call the random AI function, okay? So if not, game over. Same thing that we have with making moves. So where is that? User clicks on mouse, if not, game over. So same thing down here. If not, game over. And game.computer turn. In that case, well, we'll just say, random AI, but game.random AI. And let's set player 2, human2 to false, and let's see what happens. Okay, now I'm going to make a click right here, and then we'll see if the computer plays down there. And the code crashes, of course. Game has no attribute human. So where did that happen? I'm going to go into the engine class. And yep, this has to be human1. Yep. Okay, let's run this. Clicking here. Square is not defined. Engine down here. Enumerate search. Okay, this doesn't make any sense if I don't have square defined. Oh, not in M, but square. So for I and square, so this enumerate thing, the whole idea is that we want to have the content in search at index location I and the location itself. And this is what, the whole enumerate idea is about, that we're having this I and the square. And now we're checking if the square is equal to U. And in that case, we are returning the I. Okay, let's try this again. I'm going to click here. Another code, unknown is not defined. Now that's a typo. Geez. Unknown. And here we are missing the N. And there we go. Did you see that? I'm going to click here, but notice something's going to happen down here. So here's my move. And okay, this was a hit. But now, this is not working. So there's still some bugs in here, but let's restart. I'm going to click right up here, which will be a miss. We can see that this is going to be a miss. So now you see the computer just scored a hit down here. Now the problem is, now it's not my turn anymore. So we have to take care of this, what happens if one of the players actually hits the other player's boats. And the answer was actually pretty simple. So just look down here or up here where it says if not hit. And here we are now switching turns, but we did, so not turns, but we are switching between human and computer operator, you may say. But we are switching regardless if that was a hit or not. So here we only want to switch if not a hit. Okay, so I'm indenting this, and that is really all we have to do. Now I'm running this. Let's first make a miss. So the computer has now also scored a miss, and now let's score a hit, which is right here. Now it's my turn again, and I can go again. I can sink that ship. Now I'm going to go for another miss, and the computer misses too. And yeah, now we can actually play against the computer, and look at this. I'm playing around. The computer's also making random moves, and at some point, you know what, let's just finish this game. Player 1 wins the game, and the computer is not moving anymore. This is all good and fine, but of course, the one thing that you all want to see is what happens when the computer starts to play against itself. And this is what we'll have a look at now. Now, the only thing that we'll have to do really is we'll set this to false. No more human involvement. It's just the computer against itself. So let's run this. And there we go. Did you see that? How quickly that game ended? Player 2 has won the game. Player 2 has found all of the ships of player 1, so let's hit return and restart that. And there we go. Another game. Player 2 has won again. Now it was player 1. Of course, the moves are just all random, and they're happening very quickly. Now, if this is a little bit too quickly, we can slow down the game, or, the animation of the game, by saying, well, before we update the screen, we'll say pygame.time.wait, and we'll introduce a wait of 100 milliseconds, which is 0.1 seconds. And now it's still pretty fast, but it's at least a little bit slower. And yes, the computer is now playing against itself. How awesome is that? I mean, just look at it. I mean, we've taught the computer how to play Battleship. I mean, we've taught the computer the rules. Now the cool part is to teach the computer some strategy, because we want the computer not only to make random moves, but to make somewhat sophisticated moves, okay? So this will be the next thing that we'll be doing in the video series.